I'm Zoe Romanowski, and with me is Dr. Christopher Kaczor, a fellow in the James Madison program at Princeton and professor of philosophy at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. Professor Kaczor has a new book called The Gospel of Happiness: Rediscover Your Faith Through Spiritual Practice and Positive Psychology, and we're talking about that today. Professor Kaczor, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Zoe.
So your areas of expertise are ethics, philosophy, and religion. What drew you to psychology?
Well, actually, my study in philosophy and in theology also has raised the topic of happiness. So, in say Thomas Aquinas' work, he has a very extensive treatment of what happiness is and what leads to happiness and what doesn't. And then Aristotle also has a similar treatment. So, part of what I was interested in is to compare and contrast what, say, people like Thomas Aquinas would say about happiness with what contemporary psychologists were saying about happiness. And I found really interesting overlaps. So that's part of what gave rise to the book.
So what is happiness, at least the way you're using it in this book?
Yeah, that's a great question. Happiness, of course, can be defined in many different ways. So in this work, I'm defining happiness in terms of 5 characteristics. So first, positive emotion, feeling joyful, uplifted, optimistic. Secondly, engagement. So that's sometimes called flow, activity, where you feel as if time stops. You feel a total sense of being in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And relationship. So having good relationships with others, friends, spouse, family, etc. The fourth part of happiness, I think, is meaning. And meaning basically involves making a contribution to something bigger than yourself. So maybe to your friends, to your family, to your church, to the school, to the larger community. And then finally, achievement. I think part of human happiness is that all of us set goals, right? We want to accomplish certain things. And so when we set goals and accomplish them, we feel a sense of happiness. So I think these 5 elements are how I'm defining happiness.
Okay, and in the book you talk about how it overlaps with positive psychology. A lot of Christians can still be skeptical about psychology. What can you talk briefly about what positive psychology is?
Sure. There's good reason for Christians to be skeptical of some forms of psychology. So the founder of psychology, Freud, was not only an atheist, but very much anti-religious. He thought that religion was a kind of enemy of happiness and flourishing. But what positive psychology has found is that the practices of religious people actually are very conducive to happiness and flourishing. So positive psychology basically is a new branch of psychology, started about 15 years ago, and it looks into trying to determine in an empirical way what really does lead to happiness, what practices, what sorts of things boost happiness, and what kinds of things really don't have any effect on it. And they measure these things and they test these things as they do medication with double-blind studies and such. So this is fairly reliable in an empirical way. And what they found basically is, I thought, quite surprising and interesting, that many core Christian practices, I'm thinking of practices like forgiveness, like gratitude, like prayer and meditation, like serving your neighbor, all these things they found are extremely conducive to happiness and well-being. And so I think it really is good news that Christians can have a kind of empirical psychological justification and rationale for what they do. And so I think this can really help boost people's faith in the reliability of Christian tradition and practice.
I love your section about gratitude in the book. It's definitely something we have to continuously cultivate, right? Tell me, do you have a personal favorite practice of gratitude yourself?
I do. It's a practice actually that positive psychologists have recommended called the 3 good things exercise. And part of what I discovered in doing research is that this practice actually first arose from St. Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits. So he recommended to the people that he was giving spiritual direction to that they think about their day, and they think about, first of all, in terms of gratitude. You know, what blessings did God give to them in this day? And then later, when positive psychologists studied the same practice, they found that for 94% of people that were moderately depressed, 94% of them felt some significant relief from doing this practice over the course of a couple weeks. So it's very easy. You just think about your day, maybe at the end of the day or maybe at the beginning of the day, think about the day before, and just write down any 3 good things that went well in your life. You know, good meal, good talk with a friend, running with a friend, whatever it is that really gave you joy and really you enjoyed, you think about that, you write that down. And basically what they found is that it counteracts what's sometimes called the negativity bias. So we just are kind of more sensitive to negative things in our environment. And this 3 good things exercise, this practice of St. Ignatius helps kind of counteract that. So that's, for me, that's a practice that I found extremely helpful.
So, is happiness something we should, as Christians, directly pursue, or is it something we should view as a byproduct of living out Christian virtue, or both somehow?
Yeah, I think the right answer is both somehow. So part of happiness is a positive emotion and kind of the pleasure that we can experience. And I think that that is best not pursued directly, but rather achieved as a kind of side effect of another part of happiness I talked about, meaning, right, where you're making a contribution to something bigger than yourself. But at least for Aquinas and for John Paul II and for Pope Francis too, our lives really are and properly geared towards happiness because our happiness is ultimately to be found in God. So the pursuit of happiness is just another way of really pursuing a deeper relationship with God because our happiness is ultimately to be found in loving God and loving neighbor. So I don't really see a contradiction between pursuing happiness if happiness is properly understood as loving God and loving neighbor. This is very much at the heart of the Christian life.
Professor Kaczor, thank you for speaking with Aletheia about happiness and about positive psychology. We wish you all the best with your new book. It's called The Gospel of Happiness. It's published by Image, which is a division of Random House, and it's out now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great talking to you.